They used to be active within Sort of People Los Angeles or East LA. They were the ones who actually had brought into like Sort of People Los Angeles's like gays into the Pleasant apartment struggle because their parents were struggling against the landlord.
Okay.
So Joey and Julie, like, they got involved with like the food program, and they're like, hey, my parents are having these troubles. So I lived with Joey and Julie for a while. I missed them, but you know, they had problems with drugs, like abuse, like being emotionally abusive to each other and stuff like that. Like Joey was,
yeah,
and Joey was active with like the local gang at the Nueva Estrada apartments, or the projects over there. So like, you know, there were a lot of contradictions and
in STP.
Oh yeah, and he wasn't like too involved with that actually, but he would come out to events, you know.
Yeah.
He was progressive in the way of like understanding the police are enemies of the people. It's needed to organize, but he wasn't like as down for that.
Yeah.
He had his own like I don't know. I don't know him too much. Yeah. Oh yeah, he's lumping for sure. Not working class, but I liked him as a person. He was funny. I liked him. Julie too. You know, I miss him, but it is what it is.
How did you end up at Uncle?
It was after my breakup with Nelly, actually.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember dropping Nelly off at the 2nd Street apartment.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was around there.
How would you describe Uncle's? Like, is it like it's not a crash pad, but it's like for folks who need a space. Like, it always has a space.
Yeah, of course. Like, we're super welcoming to about everybody. Obviously, like, you know, not fucking like enemies or whatever, like cultural nationalists and whatnot.
Yeah, of course.
But we're always trying to get better, but we need to get better at cleaning and whatnot. But other than that, like, it's really good. Like, people are always down to help you. Like, there's not this like idea of like, oh, we're all separate, you know, in our own rooms and whatnot. Sometimes that happens, but that's only due to like people's schedules being all crazy, you know.
Yeah, or having work or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. You know, but other than that, like, we're always working together, eating together, working on stuff, talking together, watching. We're gonna start watching movies again soon, so that'll be cool.
Yeah.
I miss showing me all the Chicano classics that I haven't gotten to see.
Yeah.
I never got to see those movies because it was always like, look, my son, these movies are the devil, you know. You know, it's like silly shit like that. So we fucking just barely watched Blood and Blood Out the other day. I'm like, oh, this fucking
I need to
sick.
See that.
You need it? You haven't seen it?
I haven't seen it.
It's fucking sick.
Because it takes place in Boyle Heights. I mean, some of it's
East
filmed
LA,
in there.
It is filmed in Boyle Heights. Like, it's like certain things. I'm like, oh, that's from there. That's
like
from
Cinco
City Terrace.
Puntos is in there.
Yeah, Cinco Puntos, like other shit like that. Like, it's pretty funny too. It's a funny movie. Obviously, it's like cheesy in some parts, but like, but yeah, like it's a classic. You know, like I gotta watch all this shit.
How would you describe your racial and ethnic identity?
Oh, that plays it because I'm Chicano, right? But I didn't know this. I always thought I was Spanish this whole time.
Yeah.
Because my dad would be like, "My son, we're Spanish. We're not like the Mexicans."
He would say it like that, my son.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He always says it like that. It's really funny. But yeah, it would be like that. But we'd always live with Mexicans. Always living with Mexicans. The only time I didn't was when I was living on a farm with my mom in a trailer, and we lived with Filipino landlords. It was fucking dope. But everywhere else, always lived with Mexicans. If it was in like the segregated part, always with Mexicans in Guatemala. It's fucking, I love it, you know. And only recently did I like look into my extended family who are still in New Mexico. So for background, right, like my last name being Roybal, like that's a particular name that goes back to like the Spanish like colonization of like specifically New Mexico. So the original Don Ignacio Roybal or whatever, he was like a soldier for like the general that came in and crushed like the indigenous rebellions against it, because within colonization, obviously, like, they don't really talk too much about the uprisings against it. It's always like America won, Spain won, France won, and blah blah. No talking about the resistance to it, you know.
How did you find out about your relationship to Roybal?
So, I mean, it's my last name, but my dad had always told me, like, my son, Roybal is a Spanish name. It's, you know, blah blah, and it's all this bullshit. But I ended up finding out maybe high school or middle school, they gave us a project saying, look up your name and see what it goes back to. And so I looked it up, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I have a great uncle named, what's his name, Edward R. Roybal.
Yeah.
And this fool's like the governor or the mayor of Los Angeles for a while. And I asked my dad about it. He's like, oh yeah, your dad, or my dad, your grandpa, he worked with him in his campaign and shit like that.
So that would mean he's your grandfather's brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's funny, like, how it works out like that.
Wow.
Yeah, so,
So you would describe yourself as
I'm Chicano, yeah. And it's funny because, like, I looked up the descendants of all that shit, what I was talking about with the New Mexico. So they ended up becoming, like, landlords, essentially. And, in the hacienda system, for like the Spanish colonization, it's feudalism, right? So you have like your lords, and then it's tied to also like ethnicity and race too, because it was like if you're white, you're pure Spanish. If you're Mexican or something like that, there's all this like whole like hierarchy of race, kind of like eugenics, kind of like that, or like a pre-form of eugenics probably, because this is 1700s, 1700s. But like within all that, all the descendants of that shit, like they're all fucking Chicanos. Like I looked at the pictures online, and because they were always inviting us out to go to the family reunions, my dad was like, "No, my son, we have to stay here. We believe in God. We're not about that.
We don't believe in science."
I know it's funny. Yeah, it's funny. I always wanted to go visit them, but I looked up on the Facebook, and they're all fucking Chicanos. It's fucking dope.
Right. How would you describe your political views or your political identity today?
So I support Maoism. And specifically, I mean like the Maoism that was made. There's no other Maoisms, but like a lot of people don't know what that means. Like Maoism, like was made in the 1980s in the Peruvian People's War that's still going to this day, and it was made by like taking the whole of Marxism. I'm not going to go into it too much, but just taking the whole of Marxism from ever since Marx and Engels made the manifesto, taking all that experience and going up to the Cultural Revolution. Gonzalo, Chairman Gonzalo, the leader of the Communist Party of Peru, took that experience and was like, okay, how can we do that here? And what are the universal characteristics of it that we can bring to the world stage? And so those characteristics that are to that world stage is Marxism, Leninism, Maoism. Principally Maoism, because that's the ideology today, Maoism. So I believe that. That's my ideology.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, no problem.
Can you describe, like, your journey or experience towards political consciousness?
Yeah, so it ties back to religion because again, like that is politics, So it goes back to then. So as I said before, I was literally studying materialism to a degree. I didn't really know what it was called.
When was it?
Middle school, right? Because I would be watching YouTube videos or stuff like that, and I was trying to see. I was agnostic in a sense. I was like, because I would be going to church on Sunday, got your youth group on Tuesday, and on Sunday, it wasn't just one church. Like Catholics, it's only 1 hour. No, we went to 2 churches, and then it was like a get-together. It was like a Bible study throughout the week. Like, it was a lot. And there was Bible studies at our house all the time. We'd be going to other people's houses. It was pretty intense. Like, I would say like 3-4 times out of the week, we're at a church of some kind.
Wow.
Yeah. But within all that, right, so I would be studying materialism to a degree, trying to look things up. I would be at school reading about science and evolution, and I would also try to study like the history of religion, like in relation to like, I don't know, not the history of religion, excuse me, the history of Christianity in particular, right? Because I wasn't studying Islam or Judaism or anything. But ever since like I think freshman year for sure, I was like, I'm an atheist because I don't believe in this or that. And then by sophomore year, I was like, I'm a communist. But that was because of like looking at history and whatnot.
You were studying this stuff on your own?
Yeah, but also it was tied to school because those ideas would come from the teacher. The teacher would be like, evolution is this, and that. And I would look into it, and I would be like, oh, that's interesting. Let me read into that.
Yeah.
So I would go to the library and I would look into the pictures and whatnot, or like, I don't know, snails, the snails that are in the rocks and stuff. And I would look into like the arguments that creationists would make. And to do that, I had to look at all the famous debates of all the they're famous only to like a certain, sect of people, but, they're famous to me, because they were so influential. But those debates between like people like Ken Ham and a lot of these people suck today, but like a lot of the atheists at that time, a lot of them are really fucked up to like Muslims and shit like that. But there were a lot of atheists at the time that were arguing against the creationists, and I would think about those arguments and I would bring them up and I would ask my dad, "What do you think? What do you think?" And he's like, "My son, I have no time for this. We're trying to cook right now. We're trying to eat." And I would always be trying to like talk about these topics, but no room for discussion, no room for argument. And argument as a thing, I think it's there's some kind of like Bible verse against being argumentative.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he would quote that at me, like, "My son, blah, blah, 1 Corinthians, blah, blah, you can't be argumentative," or something like that. And, you have to listen to your parents, agree with them always, stuff like that. But to take all that, I would be learning also about other stuff that was happening around the world. Like, I would be wanting to know what's going on, current events. And so I'd watch YouTube videos a lot of the times. What's going on? What is this country doing? What's going on in the news?